Welcome back, alchemists. Ask just about anyone what the goal of historical alchemy was, and they'll almost immediately respond turning lead into gold. A smaller percentage may also mention the elixir of life, and even fewer still would also include the quest for a universal solvent. But today I want to speak with you about one of the lesser known goals, one which is among the strangest and most misunderstood symbols in all of Western esotericism, the homunculus. Most people who knowledgeably encounter this word imagine something grotesque, a tiny artificial man in a bottle born of hubris and forbidden science. And that's understandable. After all, the 16th century alchemist and pioneer of modern medicine, Paracelsus, provided a recipe for creating a homunculus that included such ingredients as putrefied human sperm and heated horse dung, while also advising it needed to be fed a diet of human blood. So yeah, you can see why people would picture it as a grotesque abomination. And while those images are certainly part of its history, they're not entirely its truth. In spiritual alchemy, the homunculus isn't a monster, but could actually be better described as a mirror. In Latin, the word homunculus means little human, but if taken symbolically, it means something far more profound, the self that has not finished becoming yet. It's the part of you that exists before identity hardens and the soul before it's domesticated by the need for survival. In medieval alchemical texts, the homunculus was described as being grown in a sealed vessel that was called an alembic, which is also sometimes referred to as the philosophical womb, and it was heated by a self-feeding furnace called an athanor. This, however, can be interpreted as a spiritual metaphor for what happens when consciousness is isolated, warmed, and allowed to gestate without interference. In this aspect, the alchemist isn't growing a tiny person, but instead is growing a new self. Now, as we all know, the goal of spiritual alchemy isn't literally turning lead into gold. It's more akin to turning experience into meaning. And the homunculus is what that meaning looks like while it's still being formed. Inside each of us lives a small, unfinished being. It carries everything we were before trauma, expectation, and necessity shaped us into something more socially acceptable, but also less authentic. It's the part of you that still wants to sing and dance in the rain, the part that still wants to playfully imagine without judgment, and still wants to feel without first donning emotional armor. But most of us seal this being away. We lock it in a psychological bottle and label that bottle adulthood or responsibility. Spiritual alchemy, however, invites us to reopen the vessel. The classical alchemical process unfolds in three major phases: negrito, also called the blackening, albedo, the whitening, and rubedo, the reddening. In our brand of alchemy, these aren't merely chemical reactions, but are instead psychological and spiritual ones. Negrito is where the old self dissolves, when depression, grief, or existential crisis strips away the lies you've been telling yourself. And albedo is when clarity returns, when you begin to see who you really are beneath all the ash and soot that was left behind. And rubedo is when that truth becomes embodied, when the new self is born. Now, the homunculus lives in the space between albedo and rubedo. It's the becoming self. It's fragile and luminous, but it can't survive in the harsh air of ordinary life until it is matured. That's why it has to be protected inside the vessel. And your meditation practice becomes that vessel. When you sit in stillness, when you visualize, or when you perform a ritual, you're not escaping reality, but are instead creating a psychic laboratory in which your inner homunculus can grow. Every time you tend to your inner world with care instead of criticism, you're warming the alembic with the athanor. Every time you forgive yourself, you're putrefying the ingredients. Every time you allow yourself to feel, you're feeding the small being inside you. This is why spiritual work often makes you feel vulnerable, because you're handling something alive, and things that are alive are also delicate. Eventually, however, the homunculus grows strong enough to leave the vessel, and this is the moment of integration, when the inner child, the shadow self, the dreaming self, and the adult self become a single organism rather than competing fragments. We're not shooting for perfection here, because that's an unobtainable goal and would only be setting ourselves up for failure. Instead, what we're looking to achieve is unity. We're working toward a self that no longer leaks energy through unhealed wounds and that knows exactly who it is. So when you meditate on the homunculus, you're not summoning something foreign, but are actually remembering a part of yourself that you've just simply forgotten. And that truly is the deepest alchemy of all. Now, of course, this wouldn't be an episode of The Transformative Alchemist if we also didn't have an associated ritual, would it? This one is called the Homunculus Incubation Ritual, and it aims to awaken, protect, and nourish your inner homunculus so that it can grow toward wholeness, creativity, and spiritual coherence, all without putrefied sperm or horse dung, thankfully. To do this ritual, you'll need the following supplies. One small candle, which should be white, gold, or pale pink. A small glass jar or bottle with a lid, which will serve as your alembic. A piece of paper, a pen, a small bowl of water, and a quiet place. Optionally, you can also include a crystal such as clear quartz, moonstone, or fluorite, incense or essential oils, or even soft ambient music to help set the mood. To begin, you'll want to dim the lights and sit comfortably before your candle, then place the glass jar between you and the flame. Now remember, this jar represents the alchemical vessel, and it's the psychic space in which transformation happens. Next, light the candle, take 3 slow breaths, and imagine the room growing still around you. Say quietly, "I enter the inner laboratory of becoming." Next, write down 3 things which you are ready to transform on the piece of paper. These could be things like fears, griefs, bad habits, old identities, or inner wounds that you carry. As you write your 3, don't think of them as failures or shortcomings, as that would honestly undermine our work. Instead, think of them as ingredients. Now, after you've created your list, fold the paper slowly and place it inside the glass jar. Next, hold your hands over the jar, close your eyes, and imagine a small, luminous being inside. Soft, unfinished, and made of breath and light. Know that this is the homunculus, your truest self in its state of becoming. With eyes still closed, lean close to the jar and whisper, "Little one, I see you, and I will tend to your becoming." Now dip your fingers into the bowl of water and lightly touch the outside of the jar with your moistened fingertips while saying, "By the waters of remembrance, be cleansed of what no longer serves." Then take a moment to imagine emotional residue washing away inside the vessel. When you're ready, hold the jar in front of the candle flame, not close enough to cause it to heat up uncomfortably, but still close enough to give it a glow. Then say, "By the fire of attention, be warmed into truth. Now visualize the homunculus growing brighter. If you're using one, place the crystal into the jar, close the lid, thus sealing the alembic, and say, "Within this vessel, my becoming is protected." Now hold the jar to your heart for a moment and allow yourself to feel its warmth as you calmly breathe. Once you're done, place the jar somewhere safe where it won't be disturbed for at least 7 days. This could be a bedside table, altar, or shelf. Each day, briefly touch it, breathe intentionally, and know that you're feeding the homunculus not with human blood, but with awareness. After 7 days, open the jar and safely discard the paper and crystal if you used one, and if you like, the crystal can even be kept as a talisman. Now, before we close, I'd like to invite you to continue this work, not just with the ideas we've discussed, but with experience. If this exploration of the homunculus resonated with you, there's a companion guided meditation called the Homunculus of the Inner Crucible, which is designed to take you into your inner laboratory to meet the small luminous self that is still becoming and to tend to its needs with patience and care. You don't need to understand anything more before entering that inner crucible. You only need a little quiet time and a willingness to listen inward. The meditation is linked alongside this episode, and it can be returned to whenever you feel the need to reconnect with that deeper current of becoming. Regardless of whether or not you tend to use that meditation, until next time, tend your vessel gently, for something living is growing there. And, as always, walk in peace and light, my friends.